I dropped Grandma's gavel at town hall, and my husband's paperwork convicted itself. If you're hearing this, hit subscribe and tell me your city. I want to see how far a small-town gavel can echo. Fog sits low on our harbor in Maine, like it's trying to keep our secrets from blowing inland. The bell above my hardware store door still rings the same way it did 30 years ago. One bright note, then the hinge sigh. I was counting bolts when Declan came home in that I worked late for us silence. He kissed the air near my cheek, not me, and hung his navy blazer on the chair Grandma Ruth said never to turn into a closet. The house keeps tallies. It knows when footsteps skip the third stair, when a wine glass sleeps in the sink instead of the rack. Tonight the house knew perfume I don't wear, and a smile that didn't make it to the eyes. Grandma's gavel sits on a peg between the kitchen window and the frame where she wrote rules in a courthouse hand. Spend names slow. Spend receipts slower. Spend mercy fastest. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and told myself receipts can carry weight if you lift them right. Declan showered like he was washing off a story and came back in a shirt he didn't own last fall. He said the thing men say when they want to put your questions to bed before you get there. It's for your own good, Mara. I'm handling the complicated parts. Then he slept like it was his full-time job. I wasn't tired. I was an inventory system. The blazer gave me a yacht club receipt with a date stamped in salt, 2 entrees, a bottle of Albarino, and a handwritten thank you from the manager to D&E. I don't go where napkins get folded into boats. I go where washers match the screw size on the tag and the coffee is strong enough to pry open a morning. I laid the receipt flat under the lamp. Paper talks if you hold it to the light. His phone lit on the table, bright as a gull's hunger. A calendar alert chimed for tomorrow. Donor briefing, 9 a.m. He hates email and loves handshakes, but there was an email too. Subject line. You made it look easy. No body text, just a red heart in the sender name. Public address, private meaning. I watched it pass like a storm that refuses to announce itself. When he slept, the house exhaled. I took the blazer to the porch because ocean air tells the truth. Navy perfume, not mine. The cuff held a dusting of white that wasn't drywall. Paper stock rub, maybe. I bagged the receipt like I bag wingnuts for customers who like the sound of a thing being sorted. Grandma would have said, label it, shelf it, and don't touch the gavel unless you're ready for the echo. I wasn't. Not yet. Morning put its elbow into the clouds and pushed out a fainter light. I opened the store, counted the drawer. The till was 50 short in the kind of way that says someone got change for a big bill and didn't log the sale. On the corkboard, a flyer for Harbor Hearts Trust slid under its thumbtack. The top corner curling. I co-founded that charity to keep heat on in winter and boats from rotting in place. The ledger lives in my back office. It's heavier when it lies. Page 7 looked like an ocean chart where sandbars move overnight. A transfer out. Legal services. With a memo line that wore its tie too tight. Temporary control documentation. Temporary control of what? I don't go to panic when the numbers lie. I go to process. Grandma's rule kept my pulse to a marching pace. Spend receipts slower. I called Tilda Sable. Licensed, discreet, the kind of investigator who files her nails with the edge of a PDF, not a drama violin. My friend June at the diner had slid me the card months ago with a "hope you never need it," the same way she slides the pie with the cracked crust, which always tastes best. Tilda answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting for my fog. I told her I needed dates, places, who's in the frame, and only what stands up in a courthouse chair. She said, "No cowboys, no capes, just clean lines." We said a noon coffee at the pier. She wore light boots and eyes that read margins first. "Start with the trust," I said, "then follow the paper. If it runs into people, fine." We watched a gull steal a fry from an empty plate. "Paper always runs into people," she said. "Who's he?" "Could be Aaron Vale, the mayor's chief," I said, before I was sure I'd meant to. Aaron knows how to talk like a Grant and walk like a closed door. By dusk, Tilda had more than fries. A photo of Declan outside Peninsula Legal at 9:47 p.m., holding a folder the way a man holds something that can't get wet. Another of Aaron looking both ways on a street with no cars. They weren't touching. They didn't have to. Proximity is a language. I printed and filed, labeled and shelved. When Declan kissed the air near my cheek again, I caught the ghost of a laugh he'd borrowed from someone who doesn't know our third stair squeaks. "Safety week's next Tuesday," he said, spoon in the sugar like he wanted it to disappear. "Town hall's got a drill. You should skip the crowd." "Crowds are where tools get borrowed," I said. "I like to see who forgets to bring them back." He smiled without teeth. "It's for your own good." Grandma's gavel watched me from its peg. The echo in my head said, "Spend mercy fastest." But mercy's not the same as letting a man sell your name for parts. I slept shallow. The harbor hooted, the radiator ticked, and a line kept walking through my head. Temporary control documentation. Control of whom? I woke to fog that didn't move and a decision that did. If the truth wanted a stage, I'd give it one with ushers and exit signs. I called Connor at the station. "You on safety week detail?" "Yeah," he said. My boy's voice carries ash and kindness. "We're running the town hall drill. Why?" "I like a good drill," I said, and let the quiet fill in the rest. He knows me. He knows the sound of nails getting lined up before the hammer comes down. Tilda texted at 8:12 with a line that clicked a lock inside my ribs. "Got eyes on a notarized packet moving to county tomorrow. Label reads, POA. Bring me what's public," I replied. "Keep what's not where it belongs." She sent a thumbs up that felt like a gavel raised, not yet dropped. Grandma used to tap the table twice before grace. "Court's in session," she'd joke, and then feed the whole street from a pot that never ran out. She taught me to set a table and set a record. Today I laid out plates, dates, times, memos, transfers. If the town was going to watch a drill, it might as well learn the difference between steam and smoke, and what paperwork looks like when it catches fire without a single flame. Tilda doesn't text gossip. She files conclusions. By noon, she slid into the booth across from me at the Pier Cafe and set down a little spiral notebook that already looked cross-examined. She ordered tea like evidence. Plain, nothing to hide behind. "Your husband's comfortable in rooms with locks," she said, not unkind. Peninsula Legal confirmed late-night lights, after-hours courier. County recorder shows an appointment slot blocked tomorrow morning, name attached to an attorney you don't use. I wasn't surprised. Surprise is what happens to people who don't label their boxes. "What's he moving?" I asked. She tapped her notebook. "Power of attorney, draft with a rider. The rider is where the teeth live. If it gets recorded, he can sign for your benefit, while deciding what your benefit is. It cites your charity as an example of assets requiring agility." Hate that word in documents. I hate it in mouths, too. Agility is how men describe stepping over you. The harbor fog pressed its cheek to the window. "Bring me what's public," I said. "Keep the rest where it belongs. I don't want a thing I can't show in a chair with a Bible," she smiled. "You're a good client. Most people want the fireworks. Fireworks don't play well in daylight." "Daylight's where truth grows," I said. And the bell over the cafe door rang like the stores at home. A gull looked in as if even birds testify where I'm from. We paid with cash because paper has a way of introducing itself to paper. Outside, the planks creaked with the low-tide heartbeat. I pocketed my receipt. Tilda pocketed the street. She walks away like a stenographer writing air. I went back to the hardware store and did the holy work of counting. Tape measures, 3 missing. People borrow length without telling you. Boxes of deck screws, full. The bag of returns by the back door, heavy. I untied it. Customers bring back what doesn't fit, and sometimes what they hope will stop fitting you. Someone had dropped a glossy program for the Harbor Hearts Trust Gala we canceled 2 years ago during storms. On the inside flap, a list of angel donors gave blessings in bold type. At the bottom, a sticker with a handwritten line, "Reactivate Q4, board consent pending." Board consent wasn't pending. The board was me and June and a retired math teacher named Walt, who can still calculate a bill in his head faster than any register. We hadn't met in weeks. If someone had written pending, they were making weather out of a clear sky. I called Walt. He answered like he always does, with his last name. "Grover. It's Mara. Did you sign anything for the trust?" "Not unless my sleepwalking got a law degree," he said. "Why?" "Paper is moving where paper shouldn't. Can you meet me at the back office at 4? "I'll bring the ledger from last spring," he said. "I never throw out a square." I texted June. She works the breakfast shift and keeps the town from getting sour by noon. She replied with a string of coffee cup emojis and a "be there." Grandma's gavel caught light from the window and made a small halo on the wall. You'd laugh if you saw it. Not a judge's piece, really. It's walnut, nicked at the head where a young woman once tested it on a kitchen table and realized a household can be a courtroom if you feed the jury first. The bell chimed, and Declan walked in like a man who knows he's composed in a mirror. He bought sandpaper he didn't need and paid with a smile he thought did more work. He flipped the bag in his palm and glanced at the clock as if time obeyed him. "You know, safety week's tomorrow," he said. "Connor's team is going to stage a drill at Town Hall. Might be a mess. You should keep the store closed. Avoid the hassle." I watched his mouth and thought about all the times words came out dressed as favors. "We'll see," I said. "People need screws when alarms go off." He pocketed his sandpaper and leaned on the counter. "It's for your own good," he said. His signature phrase. If you measured it with my shortest tape, it would still run long. When he left, the air relaxed like shoulders after confession. I locked the register and turned the sign to "Be Right Back," then walked to the back office where the ledger lives. I took down the blue binder with the charity's spine label and opened it to the last audited page. My fingers know the weight of well-kept books. The numbers sat upright and looked me in the eye. The recent printouts did not. They slouched. They always do when they've been taught bad posture by someone's hurry. June arrived first. She put a foil-wrapped sandwich on my desk like communion. "Eat," she ordered, then looked at the ledger the way nurses look at charts. "How bad?" "Bad in pencil," I said. "Worse if a pen gets near it." Walt followed with his square ledger, the corners dog-eared from years of talking sense into digits. He wears a cardigan that doesn't care what month it is. "Let's balance the seesaw," he said, and his pencil made that precise whisper that calms me more than hymns. We matched deposits to pledges, invoices to deliveries, withdrawals to memos. We found a transfer labeled "Outreach" with no outreach to show. We found a retainer to a law office we hadn't retained. We found a line item called "temporary control documentation," which is not a thing decent people write in the same sentence as a charity that buys children winter boots. "Who has login credentials besides you?" Walt asked. "Declan," I said, and my tongue didn't fall out. "And the city liaison for grants. That's Aaron." June set her elbows on the desk. "Never liked a woman whose smile stops at the teeth," she said. "You going to the drill?" "We're going," I said, "and we're not bringing fireworks. We're bringing chairs." "Chairs?" she asked. "For people to sit in when they hear the sound of their own voices played back," I said. "And for the rest of us to sit in judgment without raising a hand." Tilda texted at 4:22, a thumbnail photo of a stamped cover page. "County recording appointment confirmed. Poe E. Vale, D. Ellison, 10:30 a.m. She included the words, "A woman like me needs more than breath." Public counter, observers allowed. "Grandma loved counters," June said, reading over my shoulder. "That's where neighbors meet the truth accidentally." We broke with a plan like a recipe. I'd prep the binder in triplicate, one for the city attorney, one for the fire marshal, one for any reporter with a notepad and a long memory. June would keep the store for me. Walt would stand near the door and be himself, which is to say, he'd make math look like ethics. I drove home by Harbor Road where the fog keeps secrets and sometimes gives them back. In the living room, the gavel waited. I dusted its head with the corner of my sleeve. "Not yet," I said out loud, which is how I talk to objects I respect. "Court opens in the morning." Declan was at the dining table with papers in a stack that had memorized his hands. He looked up with soft eyes I used to believe. "I booked us a weekend away next month," he said. "Saratoga, hot springs, clean air, a reset." People love to say reset when they're holding down your power button. I set a plate on the table and watched the stack. "What are you signing?" I asked. "Charity renewal forms," he said. "Boring, I'll handle it." He smiled then like he'd offered me an umbrella when it's raining in his pocket. "Thank you," I said, "but I like rain." He tried to kiss my forehead. I stood still and let air be the thing between us. Then I rinsed dishes that weren't dirty and put them in a rack that didn't need them. because busy hands are less likely to shake. I slept lightly again. The radiator clicked a prayer in Morse. At 3:07 a.m., the harbor horn sounded one long note, and I knew old captains were turning in their graves to check the weather. I lay awake and rehearsed the morning like a church reading. Binders, names, calm. By 8, the sidewalk hummed. Tilda sent a thumbs up from 2 blocks away. June texted a photo of the store door with a sign she'd written in her diner script. Back soon, court in session, be kind to the screws. Walt replied with a single equation that balanced 2 sides of a not equal sign and then drew them even. I wore my jacket with the deep inside pocket because paper likes company. The binder fit like a heart under my lapel. I could feel its corners when I breathed. Town Hall looks like it could testify. Columns that have listened to names for 100 years. Steps that have carried decisions up and down until they wore the middle smooth. The flag was out and the fog had given us a view. The drill signs hung on easels. Safety Week Community Preparedness. The fire marshal, a woman named Ortiz, who doesn't blink for nothing, stood with a clipboard. Connor's engine idled down the block. My son lifted his chin when he saw me. That's our hello. Declan arrived with Aaron, both of them dressed in that morning court confident. He nodded at me like we were neighbors. Aaron wore a scarf the color of a bruise. People gathered in little knots. City clerk, 2 council members, a reporter from the harbor paper with a pencil tucked behind his ear like a third eyebrow. Good turnout, Declan said to no one and everyone. Proud of our town. Pride is a jacket people throw over a stain. Inside, the clerk's office clicked like a small typewriter. There's a glass window with a gap at the bottom, the width of an envelope. I love that gap. I love what it admits and refuses. Behind the window, a young man with a name badge that said Beckett smiled the way new hires do before they learn which drawers stick. Recording appointments, check in here, he said, comedy in his timing, because he didn't know we were all in a play. Erin slid her folder under the glass. Power of attorney, she said. D. Ellison granting authority to E. Vale for limited actions. Limited, I repeated, as if practicing a foreign word. It tasted like a key someone won't quite let you hold. Beckett stamped an intake slip. Observers may sit there, he said, pointing to chairs against the wall. 4 chairs. I thought of June. I thought of Grandma. Set a table. Set a record. Fire Marshal Ortiz checked her watch and lifted a hand. Drill starts in 10, she said, projecting without raising her voice. Connor moved to the hallway junction where a pull station waited for instruction. The town attorney, Mr. Leeds, sleeves rolled, tie reluctant, took a place by the window, noticing me in the same way people notice gravestones with names they know. Mara, he said, you brought reading material? Light fiction, I said, and patted the binder in my jacket. Lots of character development. He almost smiled. We'll see if it has a satisfying arc. Arcs are for electricity, I said. We're doing carpentry. The clerk called names like a teacher who knows the exam is open book. Vale, Aaron, Ellison, Declan. The 2 stepped to the counter. Paper slid. The stamp thunked, so official, so sure of itself. Aaron angled her body to make a wall with her shoulder. Declan took a pen a little too smoothly. A man who has practiced looking natural. And that's when Ortiz raised her palm and Connor pulled the station. The alarm bloomed. Not a scream exactly, more like a stern chorus telling people to put their hands where the exits can see them. Sprinklers did not rain down. This was a dry run. But sound shifts air, and when air shifts, truth moves with it. A dozen townspeople stepped in from the hall, following the drill arrows to the assembly zone, right through the clerk's office, because that's how the building was designed when the town still trusted its own maps. I stood up. Walt stood. The reporter's pencil woke. Aaron made a face that said inconvenience, then put on a public smile. Declan did the math and came up short. I reached into my jacket and took out the binder like a man at a revival takes out a hymn book. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Alarms had already done that work. Since we're all practicing safety, I said, let's keep the town safe from paperwork that pretends to know what's good for women who didn't ask. Ortiz looked at Leeds. Leeds looked at the chairs. Chairs do one thing better than any object. They hold weight without complaint. I set the binder on the counter's ledge and opened to the first tab. The page shone under fluorescent honesty. Dates, transfers, memos, I said. A retainer, labeled outreach. A rider labeled temporary control. A notarized draft granting Miss Vale the right to sign in my name for what the draft considers my benefit. Aaron said the thing people say when paper finally meets its audience. This is being taken out of context. Context is what chairs give you, I said, nodding to the row, then to Leeds. Please read the memo lines, counselor. If my charity is mentioned as an example of agility, I'd like to hear it aloud, in this room, during safety week. He took the binder. Lawyers know the texture of trouble before they know its name. He read. He cleared his throat. He read again, slower. He looked at Aaron. He looked at Declan. He looked at me like a man who sees the tide where the street used to be. We should step into a separate room, Aaron said. We should stay exactly where the alarms put us, I said. Public business belongs in public. Tilda was there, of course, quiet as a second shadow. She didn't wave. She placed a thin recorder on the edge of the chair because consent lives better when it can hear itself later. I'm capturing ambient from my notes, she said to Ortiz, who nodded. Authority recognizes clean work when it sees it. Declan tried the smile he uses when he wants to move a conversation onto a porch where he controls the chairs. Mara, it's for your own. Good, I finished, not loud, not kind. I know the phrase. My grandmother told me the longer a phrase gets used, the less it means. Leeds spoke then, with the caution of a man whose job is to keep the town from becoming a headline. Miss Vale, Mr. Ellison, before any recording, I need confirmation of spousal consent for this POA. Miss Ellison, Mara, do you consent? I looked at the binder. I looked at my son, who stands where fires begin so others can stand where they end. I looked at the gavel in my head and tapped the table once without touching it. No, I said, I do not, and I have receipts. The alarm cut to silence exactly then. By design, the drill timer satisfied with our ability to assemble. Silence is where verdicts form. The room made a shape around us. Aaron's scarf looked darker. Declan's pen stopped wanting to be useful. Leeds closed the binder gently as if it were a hand he meant to shake. Then the recording cannot proceed, he said. Not today. Not without consent. He looked at Ortiz. Marshal, would you note that a public safety drill revealed a need to verify documentation surrounding a charitable entity's control? Ortiz wrote like a notary in uniform. Logged, she said. The reporter's pencil scratched its little gospel. I breathed. I didn't smile. Smiles spoil the taste of truth on the first day. And that's when a clerk in the back, who had been pretending to be a filing cabinet, coughed up the sentence that always arrives when you refuse to whisper. We have a call holding from the county registrar, he said, voice higher than his badge. They want to confirm whether Miss Ellison is physically present for consent signatures. Tell them she is, I said, and that she brought her grandmother. I touched the place in my jacket where the gavel wasn't, but might as well have been. The echo is the same with or without wood. The room held its breath. Towns learn, in a moment, whether they prefer clean pain or dirty peace. Mine chose clean pain the day my grandmother taught it how to eat pot roast around a table that doubled as a bench. Leeds turned to Aaron. We'll need to review the writer, he said, and the memo lines, and the way the charity appears in your examples. Of course, she said, the way people say, of course, when a door stops being theirs. Declan didn't look at me. He looked at the exit map on the wall like it could redraw itself under his finger. I have learned to let a minute finish its own sentence. I stood still and let the town hear itself think. And in that quiet, with the alarms sleeping and the chairs doing their duty, I knew Act 3 had already booked its seat. Grandma Ruth never raised her voice, but she could lift a house with a sentence. When I was 10, she tapped her knuckles on our kitchen table like a judge who didn't need a robe and said, "We don't burn truth, we label it, we shelf it, and when folks get fog in their eyes, we present it under light." I used to think she meant report cards. Later, I understood she meant people. After the drill hush, town hall breathed like something alive. paper rustled, pencils softened their point against the page, and a dozen small civic hearts remembered what they were for. I left with my binder back under my jacket, corners warm from a public counter, and felt the day tilt toward whatever comes after fog. At the curb, Connor stepped into my shade the way sons do when they want to make the world smaller for a second. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need the answers all at once. He just looked at my eyes like a man checking a pilot light. "You steady?" he asked. "Steady enough," I said. "You?" He nodded. "We're running hydrant tests down on Alder after lunch. If you need me..." "I'll need you to do your job," I said, "and then come by for pot roast." He grinned with half his mouth, the half that belongs to my side of the family. "That how court adjourns at your place?" "We tapped the table twice," I said. "Then we passed the carrots." He squeezed my shoulder and went to the engine. I went home, which is where Grandma kept her law library. 1 gavel on a peg, 3 rules hand-inked in a frame, and a pie tin dented by summers of cooling what should never be rushed. I set the binder on the dining table and opened to the first divider. A name written in my hand can stand up in my town. I added little flags, dates bright as buoys, so even a nervous lawyer could find the shore. Not because I planned to argue, because I planned to present and let the chairs do their work. The front door clicked. Declan stepped in with the air of a man who'd rather be alone with his reflection. He paused when he saw the binder, performed a smile like a piano lesson. "We could have handled this quietly," he said, setting his keys down in a neat line that made the wood remember. "You made a scene." I turned a page. "The town made a scene," I said. "I brought a table." He laughed without committing to it. "You always loved your stage." "I love my chair," I said. "The one that holds when other things don't." He circled like a man choosing an angle instead of a truth. "Mara, it's complicated. There's language you wouldn't follow. Let me make the paperwork do what it needs to." "You said that last spring when you streamlined the trust interface," I said. "It took me 6 hours to find where winter boots became operating overhead." "That was a mislabel," he said, quick, confident. "We're very careful with labels in this house," I said, looking at the framed rules. "That's why they last." His face softened into what strangers might call kindness, and I now call practice. "You don't need to fight me." "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm formatting." He picked up his keys, set them down again, then found the door. A person's relationship to doorknobs says more than their vows. He rotated, exhaled, and left the way men do when they expect the house to bend behind them. When he was gone, the quiet did what it always does. It told the truth. I put a kettle on and phoned June. She answered with the diner in the background, a chorus of forks deciding their destiny. "He bristled," I said. "They always bristle before they molt," she replied. "You need pie?" "Evidence," I said. "But I'll take pie later." I hung up and pulled Grandma's recipe tin from the pantry. Not for recipes, but because she used to hide little notes between index cards. Wisdom tucked under cinnamon. I found one I hadn't read in years. Blue ink in her courthouse hand. "Spend names slow. Spend receipts slower. Spend mercy fastest. Mercy is not permission, it's a clean exit sign." I read it twice. Mercy is not permission. It's a line you can set with a ruler and still cry over. I taped the card inside the binder's front cover where the town could borrow it if it needed. The afternoon leaned. Walt texted a photo of a napkin where he'd balanced 2 columns with the elegance of a man who knows a straight edge when he sees one. June sent a picture of the store door with a fresh sweep mark. She'd mopped because dignity loves a clean threshold. At 3, Tilda called. She doesn't waste syllables. "Short update," she said. "County registrar flagged the POA for extra review, routine, when a charity gets mentioned in examples. The clerk used the phrase optics in my hearing. Optics likes daylight," I said. "Exactly," she said. "Also, I pulled public board minutes for the mayor's office and noted a closed session last month about a grant alignment. No details, of course, but timing sings harmony with your ledger." "Keep it clean," I said. "I only want what can be read out loud in the same room as my grandmother." Tilda chuckled. "Understood." I stood at the sink and watched gulls argue over nothing. The day gathered itself like a witness preparing to swear. I thumbed the gavel peg and let my fingers rest. It's not a sacred object. It's a tool. Tools do their best work when you don't mistake them for magic. Evening came in with its pocket full of quiet. I cooked pot roast because that's what you make when the house needs to remember it knows how. Connor showed at 7, hair damp from a washdown, boots leaving the clean, honest dirt of men who've stood where water meets flame. He took a plate, then stood to tap the table twice the way his great-grandmother taught him, and smiled that half-smile again. We ate slow. Food respects slow. He cleared his throat when his plate was a map of what used to be a meal. "I don't need the details, Ma," he said. "I mean, I'll listen if you want to tell me, but I don't need them to do what comes next." "What comes next?" "You be you," he said, easy as a hydrant unlocking. "I'll be me. If the town needs a calm, we'll bring a calm. If it needs a report, we'll bring a report. If it needs chairs, I got the folding ones from the station in the truck." I laughed with my whole mouth for the first time in days. "Always bring chairs," I said. "People do better when they're not balancing." When he left, I washed dishes at courtroom pace. Then I took the binder to the coffee table and added a section I hadn't planned. After. A page for what happens when you don't set your life on fire to keep someone else warm. A page for redirecting funds back to boots and heat and roof tar that doesn't mind the cold. You'd be surprised what a town can repair when it stops pretending certain names are untouchable. I slept closer to deep than I had since the fog began. Morning arrived with the sense that the day had decided on itself without me. I dressed in clothes that could sit a while and breathe good. At the store, I restocked hook and eye latches because the harbor wind loves to teach doors they're not in charge. June hugged me like a friend and a fence post. "You'll do fine," she said. "He'll do what he does, and the town will do what chairs always knew it could." At 9:30, the Harbor Paper's reporter, his name is Caleb, but everyone calls him Scrib, came by to buy 2 rolls of tape and an extra pencil, as if words needed hardware to stand upright. "You heading back to town hall?" he asked, as if the grocery store aisle were a witness stand. "I'm heading wherever the light is best," I said. He laughed into his sleeve. "I like days with quotes." I walked the binder back across Main, every storefront clock deciding what time looked nicest on their wall. The sky found a shade between blue and steel where hope looks like weather, not magic. Tilda waited near the steps, leaning against a column the way paper leans into a clip. "Leeds asked for a quiet room," she said. "Ortiz wants it in the foyer. The clerk recommends the front counter. Congratulations. You're the coin everyone wants to spend." "We'll spend names slow," I said, patting the binder, "and receipts slower." We went inside. The foyer smelled like old wood and 100 weddings. Ortiz had arranged chairs, God bless that woman, with aisles left clear like she'd measured the room with a string. Leeds stood with his sleeves rolled, already tired of a day that hadn't reached its point. Aaron's scarf had found a new color. It still looked like a bruise. Declan kept one hand in a pocket like he was holding something that might run. Leads opened. Lawyers like openings. "For everyone's benefit," he said, "we're going to revisit the proposed recording with the understanding that spousal consent is required and that the charitable entity's mention in any rider raises additional questions that demand clarity." He could have saved time and said, "Chairs, do your thing." I didn't talk first. That's an old trick. The person with the binder doesn't rush. Let the counter call the number. Let the room remember its dignity. Beckett, the young clerk from yesterday, took his place behind the glass. He had learned overnight how to hold his face. He stamped something quietly and looked at me the way a boy looks at the ocean before he learns it's cold. "Miss Ellison," Leeds said, "do you still withhold consent?" "I still withhold," I said, "but I brought mercy." Aaron's eyebrows lifted at the word as if it were an exotic spice. I set the binder on the counter, opened to the tape card in Grandma's hand, and read it out loud like scripture nobody's heard because it was handwritten in a kitchen. "Spend names slow, spend receipts slower, spend mercy fastest. Mercy is not permission, it's a clean exit sign." The foyer listened. "I'm not here to salt the earth," I said. "I am here to salt the steps so good people don't fall." Leeds nodded once, as if a courtroom could clap without using its hands. I flipped to the tab marked with a bright blue flag. This page shows a transfer out of Harbor Hearts labeled Outreach, with no corresponding outreach. This page shows a retainer to a law office we did not retain. This page shows the draft language of a writer invoking temporary control documentation with our charity as an example of agility. I let the words sit like something with wings that don't belong indoors. I'm not alleging intent, I am presenting pattern. Scribb's pencil moved like a small fish under clear water. Ortiz shifted her weight to her other foot, the way people do when they settle in for the long part. Declan tried for his porch voice. Mara, I was smoothing snarls. Bureaucracy eats good work if you let it. Bureaucracy eats sloppy work, I said. Good work comes to the table with a napkin. Erin folded her hands on the folder, wedding toast calm. The writer merely anticipates emergencies. Emergencies enjoy process, I said. That's why we practice leaving a building without trampling each other. Leeds took the binder, turned to the flagged pages, and this is what I love about honest men with tired ties, read aloud. I didn't memorize the legal syntax. I memorized the way the room's shoulders rose and fell together. I memorized the exact moment the word benefit sounded like a joke nobody laughed at. Chairs held the weight. Rules held the air. When he finished, he shut the binder like a man closing a family album at the page before the fight. We're going to pause any recording of a power of attorney until we've conducted a review, he said, professional as a level on a fresh shelf. Miss Vale, Mr. Ellison, your cooperation will help shorten the day. Erin processed the sentence with her eyes. Of course, she said again, and now the phrase had work to do. Declan's pocket hand clenched. He didn't look at me. He looked at the old brass door hardware as if it owed him a favor. I stood still and let the quiet do the heavy lifting. Grandma used to say mercy is the way you leave a room without breaking the hinge. I tapped the counter with 2 fingers, my version of her gavel, and spoke into the foyer's good wood. Here's my mercy, I said. I will not speculate in public. I will not call names beyond the ones printed on these pages. I will not drag our town through mud that belongs to private grief. But every dollar goes back where feet are cold, and every memo line learns how to stand up straight. We clear it the clean way, or we read it again tomorrow in a busier room. Ortiz wrote something that looked like the word logged next to a time that will show up in a report later. Walt from the back coughed the kind of cough that means mathematics agrees. June, God lover, wasn't even in the building, but I could feel her in the chairs like coffee you forgot you drank, keeping you upright. Leeds breathed in a decision. We'll reconvene this afternoon with the city auditor and the trust board, he said. Until then, no further action on the POA. The foyer exhaled. A clock somewhere decided to be heard. Outside, the fog took a step back to watch. Declan shifted as if the floor had introduced him to gravity. Erin gathered her folder like a woman who just remembered purses have zippers. Scribb capped his pencil with the satisfaction of a man who got quotes and didn't have to invent heroes. I closed the binder. It felt lighter, the way boxes feel lighter when you've put the right labels on the right sides. On my way out, I touched the column. Old buildings like to know you notice their work. The steps held. The door swung easy. The town did what chairs do. And I walked into a noon that didn't need me to squint to believe it. On my way out, I touched the column. Old buildings like to know you notice their work. The steps held. The door swung easy. The town did what chairs do. And I walked into a noon that didn't need me to squint to believe it. That's Grandma's 3rd rule working in daylight. Mercy moves people to the exits without smoke, and if you do it right, the only thing that burns is the part of the lie that needed oxygen it couldn't have. The harbor bell chimed the hour. I counted the rings like a woman who has learned how to spend names slow and receipts slower, and who's ready, if she has to drop a gavel you can't see and still hear from 3 streets over. Because yes, Act 4 is waiting, and it brought witnesses. Act 4. Afternoons in our town have a sound, forklifts 2 streets over, gulls arguing doctrine, and the courthouse clock deciding what honesty should wear. By 2:30, Town Hall had traded fog for a light that made paper look more like a mirror than a shield. That's when the city auditor walked in with a canvas bag and a face that had met numbers in the wild and lived to name them. She introduced herself as Miss Chen and shook hands like a level finding true. "We'll keep this restrained and thorough," she said, eyes doing the quiet math of a person who doesn't perform for a room. "And we will keep it here." June took the seat to my left, apron still on because some women are uniforms even when they're not. Walt sat to my right with his ledger and the pencil that has slowly eaten its own tail. Leeds rolled his sleeves another fold, a man preparing to hold back a river with a filing system. Fire Marshal Ortiz stayed near the door, an unmoving hinge. Declan and Aaron shared a folder as if the paper could decide which hand it loved more. Miss Chen began with a single sheet. "I'm asking questions, not writing endings," she said. "First, Harbor Hearts Trust Transfer marked outreach. No outreach to a company. Second, retainer disbursement to Peninsula Legal. Not budgeted, not board approved. Third, draft writer language referencing temporary control documentation and using the trust as an example of agility." She paused, let the words cool enough to handle. "We will walk through each. We will use chairs instead of cliffs." Chairs scraped the floor like good punctuation. Beckett, behind the clerk's glass, had learned how to make himself part of furniture. I appreciated the effort. We are all, at best, something the room can rest on. "Miss Ellison," Chen said to me, "confirm the board did not authorize either disbursement." "We did not," I said. "We, meaning myself, Miss June Avery and Mr. Walter Grover, approve grants and winter boots and repairs you can see with your face." I tapped Walt's ledger. "We do not approve adjectives pretending to be invoices." Walt slid the ledger forward. Chen's pencil made notes in a hand that looks like a metronome. "Mr. Ellison," she said, shifting her gaze, "you possess portal credentials." Declan cleared his throat in the key of rehearsed. "I helped modernize an interface that was behind the times. My goal was speed. Mara's busy. Store, deliveries. I took tasks off her plate for her own." "Good," I said, and he tasted the echo of his phrase. "You said that already. It didn't get better with travel." Chen stayed with the numbers. "The retainer," she said. "Who initiated the engagement? Who authorized release?" Erin lifted her chin. "The city liaises with charitable partners. Legal reviews are appropriate when grant cycles compress. My office indicated a prudent pre-review. We did not direct funds." "And yet funds left," Chen said. "No accusation, only architecture. Peninsula Legal acknowledges receipt. Did the trust execute any service agreement?" I opened the binder to a tab marked Retainer and placed a single page on the counter. Email header print, subject and time, no body. "Public metadata," I said. "Request forwarded late, no board copy. A retainer note logged the next morning. That's all I will bring unless counsel requests more in writing." Leeds nodded. He likes paper that understands its lane. "Let's hold there. Miss Vale, we'll ask for your office's communications in the ordinary course." Erin's smile tried on compliance and found it fit. "Of course," she said, and the room made space for the words while declining to lie down in them. A courier appeared briefly in the doorway, as if the day needed a prop. Brown envelope, county seal. Beckett took it through the gap in the glass and glanced toward us. He didn't speak. That's not his job anymore. He slipped the envelope under a weight shaped like a bell so it wouldn't travel without permission. Ticking clocks don't always tick loud. Sometimes they sit on the counter and pretend to be mail. "Next," Chen said, and turned to the writer. "Language here anticipates emergency delegation, risk, weather, absence. The example line leverages the trust for the idea of agility." "Mr. Ellison, Miss Vale, did you draft this? Who provided the example?" Declan reached for the pen he didn't get to use this morning. "Common practice," he said. "Templates include hypotheticals." "Hypotheticals are clean when they don't step on real toes," Chen said. "When they do, we check shoe size." She scanned again, then set the page down, palms flat. "Human paperweights. Here's my interim. The charities mentioned in any delegation rider is poor optics and poorer governance. No consent this morning, no recording today. We will pull bankside confirmations for the disbursements and review portal access logs." Leeds wrote a note for the clerk with a pen that sounded like a signature having second thoughts. Ortiz shifted to her other leg, comfort settling in. Scribb's pencil drew its tail around a date. Walt exhaled a small, "There it is." Declan went to the script menus when the door is closing. "Mara," he said, looking at me and also past me, "we could step aside, make sense of this like adults." "We are," I said. "Adults bring chairs to the hard parts." He rubbed his thumb against his forefinger the way gamblers ask for coins from air. Aaron watched the room the way a person watches bridge cables in the wind. "Miss Ellison," Leeds said, "you mentioned you had something labeled after." "He doesn't miss tabs. It's how his kind lives long." "I do," I said. "It isn't a punishment section, it's operations. Dual signature policy, portal credential reset, monthly board reconciliation open to the city's liaison, any liaison who isn't in the rider, plus a standing public audit window twice a year where anybody can come read where winter boots went." June lifted a hand from her lap. "And a soup night," she said. "We read numbers better when our hands are warm." Chen smiled without moving her mouth much. "Governance plus hospitality," she said. "I approve in theory." "Then in practice," I said, "we start today. Keys back in the right hands. Not because I enjoy wins, because kids enjoy boots." The courier envelope on the clerk's counter chose that moment to breathe. Beckett looked at Leeds, who nodded like a man who understands rituals keep us from chaos. Beckett opened the seal and read a small cover sheet. Then he lifted his head, still new enough to public life to let his eyebrows work in front of people. "Registrar is confirming a pending slot," he said carefully, and requesting signature verification for Miss Ellison, as the system flagged a mismatch on an earlier filing last week. The room's air learned a new geometry. Not a gasp, nothing theatrical. Just the way quiet rearranges furniture when it sees a stain it missed. "Earlier filing?" Leeds asked. Calm is his middle name. Beckett read again so the letters wouldn't feel rushed. A preliminary notice, withdrawn the same day, attached a stylized M signature on a preparatory form. The registrar's software flagged it as inconsistent with records. He set the page down as if setting down a hot lid. Everyone kept their hands to themselves in that polite New England way that says we can do hard things without throwing food. "Mara," Declan began, voice turning cotton, "you sign different when you're hurried." "I sign slow," I said. "I file slow. I breathe slow. It's my culture." Aaron stepped in, smooth as a hallway. "Preliminary paperwork bounces around all the time," she said. "Drafts, placeholders. Clerks press buttons they don't mean." Chen didn't look at Aaron. She looked at the page. "We'll ask Registrar to send the exemplar and the timestamp. We'll compare it to Miss Ellison's signature card on file." She glanced at me with something like respect and not a particle of pity. "Do you have a clean exemplar handy? Grandma's recipe tin keeps more than sugar and counsel." I reached into my bag and brought out the bank's old blue card, the one with ink that doesn't fade because it was made to last longer than a season of mistakes. My name sat there in letters that had learned their posture from a woman who labeled everything she loved. "Use this," I said. "It has gravy stains on the envelope, but the signature survived Sunday dinners." Walt made a pleased noise, a sound people only make around sums that hold. Leeds gestured to Beckett, who took the card with two hands like it might testify. He scanned it through the window slot where paper becomes light and light becomes proof. The machine hummed. "Proofs enjoy music," Declan pressed forward. "Mara, let's not turn this into some spectacle." "Spectacle is hats and balloons," I said. "This is a counter. You chose it. Sit with it." He looked at the door as if fresh air could print a different afternoon. Aaron adjusted the bruise-colored scarf like the day had found a tender place. Ortiz stayed at the door, not blocking, simply present. Authority's version of a chair. Chen set out her next pieces the way a nurse sets out instruments, each with a name, none with an apology. "Immediate recommendations," she said. "Freeze discretionary disbursements from the trust. Require 2 live bodies in the room for any portal action, one of whom must be a board member. City liaison privileges stand, but any reference to the trust in delegation riders ceases now. We'll schedule a public audit window for reading day. Miss Ellison, you'll post receipts by category. Boots, heat, repairs, with dates." Gladly, I said. We've always kept them. We'll add chairs. June nodded, kingdom come satisfied. And coffee. Scribb's pencil finally paused, and he looked up like an audience that paid for orchestra seats and got the plot twist free. Can I quote spectacle as hats and balloons? He whispered. You can, I said. Spell balloons right. The clerk's scanner pinged, twice, like a polite doorbell. Beckett's screen populated with registrar notes even I could almost read upside down. He printed. He did not announce. He slid the page under the bell weight. Leeds took it. Chen took it from him. It's enough for today, Chen said after a careful minute. The registrar will refer the mismatch to their routine verification queue. No conclusions here, only processes. Our pause stands. We reconvene tomorrow morning. In the meantime, she nodded at me, install your after. Declan exhaled like a tire learning about nails. This is overreach, he said softly, a man auditioning for reasonable. This is rehearsal, I said. For better days. Leeds' voice found closing. Lawyers love a closing that isn't a door slam. We're adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you for your cooperation. Miss Ellison, Mr. Grover, Miss Avery, please stay a moment to sign the interim governance memo. People stood up like pages turning. Chairs announced themselves back to being objects. Ortiz opened the door with a hinge that had aged kindly. Aaron murmured something to Declan that sounded like tomorrow, which is what people say when today declines to be theirs. Connor appeared in the doorway with a stack of folding chairs he hadn't needed to deploy. You asked, he said with that half grin. I deliver. Keep them close, I said. Tomorrow might need more sitting. We signed where the page asked nicely. June dotted her name like she dots lemon meringue. Walt drew his line straight as dawn. I wrote mine the way I always do, readable to strangers, unchangeable to anyone. Outside, the harbor had traded its arguments for a truce. The bell on Main gave 3 patient notes. Tilda caught my eye from the hallway, no recorder in hand now, just that little notebook filing the weather. Good shape, she said. Plenty of room for Act 5. Bring your quiet, I said. We'll bring chairs. I stepped into the parking lot, felt the ocean in my lungs, and let the day finish without me. Grandma's rules hummed in my pocket with the binder's corners. Spend names slow, spend receipts slower, spend mercy fastest. Mercy tonight looked like lights off at the store on time and an early loaf for June to take to the breakfast crowd. It looked like telling the truth tomorrow in the same voices we use for grace. It looked like a town that had practiced leaving safely and was now practicing staying together, while the paperwork learned its manners. The clock on the courthouse made 4 sound like an instruction. I thanked it under my breath and went home to set the table. Court would be in session in the morning. The gavel didn't need wood to be ready. And if I'm honest, I slept well. Because the counter was still where I left it. Because chairs were stacked by the door. Because the binder had a new tab labeled Morning. Because yes, Act 5 had sent a note ahead. Bring witnesses. Mornings here have an honesty you can set a watch by. The harbor puts on its steel blue face, the gulls practice cross-examination, and Town Hall looks like a book that remembers the plot. By 10 a.m., the foyer had filled with the kind of quiet that means people brought their inside voices and their best pens. Miss Chen arrived first, canvas bag squared to her hip, calm that doesn't change its mind. Leeds followed with sleeves that had given up resisting. He'd made peace with work. Walt and June took seats like pews, my left and right, ledger and apron, arithmetic and breakfast. Fire Marshal Ortiz leaned by the door, hinge and witness in one. Beckett stood straighter behind the glass. Overnight, he had acquired the stillness of furniture. Declan wore his reasonable suit. Aaron had a new scarf, lighter, like a bruise practicing being Sky. Tilda was there, low profile, notebook closed, as if quiet could be written after the fact. Scribb's pencil had re-entered the world, sharpened to a verdict. Leeds called it in. Reconvened for review, registrar materials pending. We'll start with governance items. He nodded at Miss Chen. Chen laid out 3 tidy stacks as if they were utensils at a good table. First, she said, trust disbursements. Interim freeze remains. Second, portal access. 2-person presence rule instituted and logged. Third, board reconciliation cadence. Monthly public window twice per year. Miss Ellison has provided categories and sample receipts. City liaison access to read-only affirmed. Miss Vale, please note, read-only. Erin nodded with care. Logged, she said, borrowing Ortiz's word because it works. Good, Chen said. Now, registrar. Beckett, bless his new spine, raised a hand through the glass like a boy asking to read. We have the verification packet, he said. He held up a thin envelope with the county seal and that small gravity seal's understand. Leeds gestured. The envelope slid under the bell weight as if the desk had learned ceremony. Chen opened the packet without flourish. Contents, she said, as if narrating for the room's pulse. Exemplar signature on file for Miss Ellison. Scanned preliminary form from last week flagged by the system. Timestamp and terminal identifier. Registrar requests our local verification. She placed the two signatures side by side. Even from a step back, I could see the difference. The way a name sits when its letters know where they grew up, versus a version taught phonics by a stranger. Leeds cleared his throat in a register chair's respond to. Miss Ellison, will you confirm the exemplar? Yes, I said. 20 years old, same ever since. My hand learned it standing at a counter with a bank teller who wore good perfume and worse advice. I told her I signed slow. She said, we like that here. Chen shifted to the flagged form. And this? Her pencil hovered like a metronome waiting to begin. I didn't write that, I said. No drama. Paper responds better to plain air. She nodded once. Terminal identifier belongs to the city liaison station, she said, reading. Then with professional mercy. That does not conclude intent, it begins process. Erin's smile tried on public service. Clerical traffic happens, she said. Forms go up, down, sideways. Buttons get pressed. I've asked my staff for logs. Good, Chen replied. We'll request them as well. Our task is narrow. Did the system attempt to prepare a form with a mismatched signature? Yes. Was it withdrawn the same day? Yes. Is spousal consent available? No. Therefore, no recording. Leeds wrote a short sentence I wish the whole country would memorize. Process protects people. Declan inclined toward the page like warmth toward a radiator. This is an embarrassing misunderstanding, he began. The trust needed agility. A draft made its way to benefit, I said softly, because the word had waited all week to meet its echo. You keep picking it up and it keeps cutting you. He looked at me then, all artifice briefly absent, and I recognized the boy who once carried my toolbox up 3 flights because elevators were for lazy future versions of ourselves. Memory is a fair witness. It tells the truth about love and also about paperwork. Chen kept us to the road. Recommendations moving forward, she said, setting out the morning's tools. 1. Remove trust as an example from any delegation rider language, citywide. 2. Require board counter-signature on any legal engagement. 3. Log liaison terminal credentials with personal authentication so that drafts show an author, not a room. 4. Internal sign training. Sign slow. She looked at me, not unkind. Which is not a joke. Walt made a small contented sound, a pencil agreeing with a policy. Leeds turned to me. Miss Ellison, you prepared an after plan? I opened the binder to the new tab. The taped recipe card in Grandma's hand faced the room like a witness that bakes. Dual signatures, I said. Public windows, category receipts with dates, and a thing my grandmother would require if she were alive to set this table. Story hour, Erin blinked. Story hour? I smiled with my mouth and not my teeth. We'll pick 2 nights a year and invite donors and beneficiaries for soup and reading. We'll read where the money went, and the people who wore the boots will tell us whether they fit. June made a quiet that can fix a broken day. Chen looked pleased the way responsible people look, the small inward yes that keeps towns standing. Adopted, she said, like a gavel that doesn't need wood. Leeds wrote a tidy line. So ordered. Beckett, who had learned courage in 24 hours, leaned into his microphone. For the record, he read, Registrar acknowledges local verification and will mark the flagged form withdrawn pending internal review. They also note appreciation for chairs. He hesitated. It actually says that. The room smiled with its eyes. Ortiz allowed the corner of her mouth to be human. Declan wasn't done. People rarely are when a story stops cooperating. "Mara, may I speak with you privately?" "Privately is where we fix sinks," I said. "Public is where we fix trust." He swallowed whatever speech had rehearsed in his mirror. Erin adjusted her scarf, fingers learning they were not in charge. Scribb's pencil stayed ready but kind. Reporters like stories that don't require them to turn the town into entertainment. He would go back to his desk and title it something like "Process Rescues Charity. Chairs do heavy lifting." I hoped he'd get that last part right. Leeds looked to Chen. "Anything further?" he asked, the courtroom cadence in his voice without the courtroom's wood. "One more," she said. "A recommendation to the trust. Appoint a fourth board seat. Someone who doesn't look like you do. It helps. Diversity is a kind of math." Walt nodded with gratitude from a century that taught him addition wasn't just numbers. "We know a high school counselor who never lost a kid to winter," he said. "She can read a ledger and a child in the same afternoon." "Bring her," Chen said. "More chairs." I closed the binder, and it felt like a day you can carry. Leeds set his pen down the way men set down worry. Erin exhaled into what might one day become accountability. Declan stared at the brass plate of the door that says, "Exit," and learned Mercy's other name. I put my palm on the binder's cover and spoke in the voice my grandmother saved for Grace. "For the record," I said, "I will not be pressing spectacle. I will be pressing receipts. If the registrar's review returns anything that needs more light, we'll set more chairs. If it returns a clean line, we'll tell the truth about that too." Chen packed her canvas bag. Process likes travel. Ortiz opened the door with a hinge that had outlived a dozen mayors and most of our weather. People stood, not rushed, not stunned, just ready to get on with a town. And then Connor stepped into the doorway with a small cardboard box and that half grin that could talk a hydrant into kindness. "Brought something," he said, sheepish, like a boy who knows his mother likes tools more than flowers. He set the box on the counter and lifted out a wooden mallet. Walnut, nicked, familiar, and placed it next to the bell weight. "I took it home last night," he said, "to oil the head. Thought you might want it today." Grandma's gavel, the real one. He had polished it until the nick caught the light like a healed thing. I didn't lift it. I didn't need to. I touched the handle, the way you touch a stone that remembers your palm. Then I tapped the counter with 2 fingers, our family's version of wood, and let air carry the sound to the corners. "Court's adjourned," I said. "Process continues." The room enacted the sentence. Leeds issued a closing. "Adjourned. Thank you for your service." Chen nodded to me like colleagues after a shift. Erin gathered her folder with hands that had started learning a new craft, holding paper without weaponizing it. Declan didn't look at me. He looked at the chairs. Maybe he finally understood why I carry them everywhere. We stepped into the day. The harbor had traded its steel for something kinder. June looped her arm into mine and steered me toward Maine the way a good friend steers a tired woman toward pie. "Hungry?" she asked. "For soup and reading," I said. "For boots and receipts. For a town that can tell the truth without setting itself on fire." Scribb jogged ahead to catch a photo of Beckett behind the glass, a young face newly fluent in the language of counters. Walt peeled off to call the counselor he'd nominated. Ortiz took her place back where doors learn discipline. On the steps, I turned back and looked through the open doorway. The counter sat where it always had. The bell weight kept paper from traveling when it shouldn't. The chairs waited for the next thing a town would have to sit with. In my jacket, the binder's corners pressed their small geometry into my ribs, the shape of a day that fit. We walked. Fog burned off in front of us like a lie getting bored. Connor fell into step and bumped my shoulder like boys do when they want you to notice they're still here. He carried the gavel in a canvas tote. He didn't swing it, he didn't flash it. He just kept pace, and that was enough. At the store, I flipped the sign to open. People need screws when alarms go off, and sometimes even when they don't. June tied on her apron tighter. Walt made a fresh column in his head, and Tilda passed by without stopping, palm flat to her notebook in a quiet salute. the stenographer of ordinary courage. Grandma's rules watch from the frame in the kitchen when we had our late lunch. Spend names slow, spend receipts slower, spend mercy fastest. I added a fourth in my mind as I salted the pot, one she implied more than wrote. Bring chairs. When the bell rang for a customer, I answered it the way I always have. And this time, the day answered back like a courtroom that had learned to cook. The gavel never struck wood. It didn't need to. You heard it anyway. Some endings arrive like verdicts. Ours arrived like soup. Steam first, then warmth, then a table you don't leave hungry. Registrar closed their loop in a sentence without adjectives. Mismatch confirmed. Draft withdrawn. No recording attempted going forward without live consent. Process does what it promises when you seed it properly. Erin sent a memo that read like a weather report. Conditions changing, visibility improving. She stepped back from liaison duties, pending review, a phrase that can grow up to mean accountability. Declan returned his portal keys and learned a skill I wish he'd learned younger, handing paper to the right hands without telling it where to walk. We added a fourth chair to the board. Ms. Rivera, the high school counselor who keeps winner from winning in kids' eyes. She reads a ledger and a teenager with equal grace. Walt drew a new column in his head to make room. June taped a fresh schedule in the bakery window. Story and soup night. Everyone welcome. I wrote it on the trust page too, under After Where Grandma's Recipe Card Lives. Bring chairs. On story night, the town showed up with coats half-zipped and names they hadn't said to each other in months. We set the folding chairs in rows and the crock pots on a long table with paper signs. Chili, chowder, mercy. Connor lugged in the water jugs and, because he can't help himself, checked the exit lights. Fire marshals call that muscle memory. Mothers call it love. I read the receipts out loud like hymns. Boots, 12 pairs, January 14th. Heat, 3 oil fills, late storm week. Repairs, roof tar, 2 buckets. Window glazing, 4 panes. People nodded with their heads and also their shoulders. Then the families who wore the boots stood, awkward at first, then steady, and told us whether they fit. A boy said his socks stopped hurting where the seam used to rub. A grandfather said the kitchen didn't sound like glass when he breathed in February. The town learned its own voice again. When we finished, June passed a plate of cornbread like communion, and Walt checked the totals the way he checks the weather by smell. Miss Rivera closed a notebook half full of thank yous that were not requests. After the chairs were folded and stacked, Connor walked me home past the harbor where the fog had retired early. He carried Grandma's gavel in the tote, head oiled, handle warm from his hand. We didn't say much. You don't talk over a day that behaved itself. At the kitchen peg, I hung the gavel where it has always waited. The nick in the wood caught a bit of porch light. Same as the day she tapped a table and taught me jurisdiction. Grandma's rules watch from the frame. Spend names slow. Spend receipts slower. Spend mercy fastest. I added the one she left between the lines. Bring chairs. The house kept its tallies. Footsteps, cups, the new silence that doesn't accuse. I poured tea and labeled the day the way I labeled jars. Town, safe, trust, upright, paper seated. Declan's shadow crossed the window only once, then kept walking. Some people learn from counters. Some need the street. Mercy is not permission. It's an exit sign that stays lit even when you're not looking. At closing time, I flipped the hardware sign to open tomorrow because I mean it. People need screws when alarms go off, and they need them the day after, too. Beckett passed by on his way home from the clerk's office and raised a hand the way a young man salutes a counter that taught him courage. Scribb's article ran the next morning above the fold with a title that made me laugh in my coffee. Chairs Save Charity. He spelled balloons right. If you ask what justice sounded like, I'd say it was Miss Chen's pencil and Ortiz's clipboard and the bell wait holding an envelope in place until the town was ready to open it. If you ask what it looked like, I'd hand you a chair. Before bed, I tapped the table twice the way Grandma did when she thought grace should echo. Connor answered from the doorframe with that half smile. Court adjourned? He asked. Process continues, I said. Bring your boots. I slept the way ledgers do when lines meet where they're supposed to, And when morning came, the harbor had already set out its light. If this reached you in a city with louder sirens and taller counters, tell me your town's name. Tell me who keeps the gavel on the wall and who remembered to bring the chairs. We'll read the receipts together next time. We'll make soup. We'll be fine, because the gavel doesn't need wood to be heard, because the truth doesn't need fireworks to be seen, because a town with chairs can outlast any fog, and because, if you're still listening, this isn't only my story. It's a way to hold yours.